All right. So what I want to talk about now is pitch counts because it still just gets butchered over and over and over if you go out and watch youth baseball games at a local tournament or whatever. And despite there being lots of resources out there, despite I kind of felt like, oh, this is kind of like old news, kind of like a no-brainer, like it's not that hard to figure out. Apparently it is. So for parents or coaches who don't know, here's a bunch of things that are challenging about pitch counts, and then I'm going to go to things that are unacceptable, and then what I think best practices are. So the biggest thing with youth baseball, which is kind of up until I'd say 17U, because I don't know if I'm going to loosely define youth baseball right now, I'd say it's the period where kids are going to play multiple positions in addition to pitching. So at like 16, 17U, like there's some 15U kids obviously who become pitchers only because maybe they have a great arm and they're really good on the mound, but they're just brutal and unathletic everywhere else. But most of the time that divide is like 16U or 17U, where it's clear that some kids are going to go play college baseball as a shortstop, as a catcher, as an outfielder. Others are going to be as a pitcher, and their ceiling is as a pitcher, so they don't really play the field as much because, if you're going to play right field, but you're going to pitch in college, and another kid's going to play right field in college or outfield in college, like you give the playing time to the kid, the outfielder, right, in the outfield. So that's where that divide hits. So up until then, it's a whole lot more challenging to manage pitch counts because kids are not just pitching, they're pitching and then they're going back in the field or they're playing the next game or whatever. So there's just way more throwing that they do in addition to the throwing that they pitch with. So trying to manage fatigue and workload is really challenging because of that, and because a lot of times you just don't have other options as a coach. You have to send a kid back out to play the outfield, to play the infield when they're done pitching, or you just have to have them out there next game. In a perfect world, you don't have back-to-back doubleheaders. You have single games each day. So if a kid pitches on Thursday, he can sit out on Friday and then get back into action Saturday. So he gets a day of rest for his arm before the next day. But, I mean, most of the time there's 2 games. In any given tournament, you usually get 1 game or 1 day of 1 game and then another day with a doubleheader, or you get 2 doubleheader days. It's just rare that you have single games on successive days just because of the format and all that. It's just tough for them to do that. So, it's a situation with you have to live with a certain amount of fatigue, and that because they're always playing shortstop or they're playing outfield constantly, they probably need to have a reduced pitch count probably a little more than you'd otherwise think. So the pitch counts that apply to high school and college and pro pitchers don't really apply when you're playing another position as well, because you don't see Max Scherzer or Clayton Kershaw throwing 100 pitches in a start and then playing shortstop for the next 3 days. Their arm would be wrecked. They would be throwing much slower. Their off-speed stuff would be much worse. And their command would be much worse, because fatigue is the enemy for both injuries and it's the enemy for performance. So when you're fatigued, check out my other podcast, YouTube episode, where I talk about fatigue and what it does to you. But basically, it destroys your command because you don't have the dexterity, the fine motor skills that you used to. And it also just, it makes your fastball slower. It reduces your spin rate. It reduces the bite of your off-speed stuff. And you just generally lose feel for the baseball. So as your shoulder and your forearms especially fatigue out, you just lose, again, that high fine dexterity, which helps you make adjustments and throw the ball where you want it to go. So being fresh is important. So now when you have a kid that played shortstop 2 games in a row, then maybe he sat a game and now he's pitching, he's still got a ton of accumulated fatigue. And our team has worn Motus sensors for this season, and you'd be shocked at how many throws you'll make on a doubleheader day. You basically make about 100 to 140 throws per game. So when we have doubleheaders, kids are going home with 280 throws logged into their Motus sensor. And they're not all hard throws, mind you. Like, they're lots and lots of soft throws and throws across the diamond, throws from shortstop to second base, like just all variations of throwing, but they're still throwing nonetheless, and it's still accumulating fatigue. And so these kids are going out to the mound not fresh, or whatever you call fresh for a major league pitcher. They're going out there like their energy meter depleted to like 60% probably, because they've played a couple games and they've made 300 throws or 400 throws in the last 2 days. So to say that then a kid should still throw the same 100 pitches that a varsity starter or a college pitcher or a pro pitcher would throw when he's fresh is, I think, a little bit misguided. Now, I'm not saying that, the MLB Pitch Smart rules that you should go way below that, but I'm just saying in general, erring on the side of caution is an intelligent thing to do because of how much kids are throwing when they're playing a second position. So, oh yeah, you get a day rest. So in general, here's an example. In our organization, if you throw 1 or 2 innings and you have 1 day rest, you can throw 1 or 2 innings again. So basically it's like 2 innings, day rest, 1 inning, or 1 inning, day rest, 2 innings. That's pretty much our cap. You're not going to throw multiple innings with 1 day rest and then multiple innings again. That's not really good for you. So, but doing that, that's like a pro baseball kind of rule. In general, you don't throw an inning and then a day off, then 3 innings, and then a day off, then another couple innings. You kind of get a day off per inning, or you go back-to-back days and then you get a day off, or sometimes you go 3 days in a row and then you get a day off or 2 days off or something, because over time it starts to catch up with you. So when I threw lots where I threw like 4 out of 6 days, like 4 innings in 6 days, or 5 innings out of 7 days, or 5 innings out of 8 days, it just catches up by the end. And that's on 2 different occasions. I went like 6 out of 8. And then I started having like a barky elbow or a shoulder thing, and that like stuck with me. So those little injuries often crop up after those really high workload days. And that was as a reliever, obviously, but it still applies to starters. So we have to be a little more cautious than we, I think, otherwise should, or compared to like a guy who's just I'm not doing anything between. I'm just doing my work. I play catch in pregame or whatever, but I'm not competitively throwing in a game. So we need to be more cautious, but what actually ends up happening is we're way less cautious with youth baseball. And most coaches don't have a clue, or if they do have a clue, they don't care, which is even worse, because they just don't care for the long-term health of these kids, or they're asking for these kids' input into how their arm feels. And I don't give a shit about how a kid's arm feels. If he says, oh, hey, guess what? My arm's great. I can pitch today. It doesn't matter. What matters is how much rest he's had, and what the researchers are saying, like out of the ASMI, who make these guidelines, are saying is going on. Because, yeah, your arm might feel fine today, and you threw 40 pitches yesterday, and you could probably give me an inning or 2 today because you say your arm feels fine. You're not lying to me. But 5 years from now, all this accumulated wear and tear is going to catch up. So it's just like if you have a car, you get a brand new car and you drive like a maniac, it's not going to blow up today, but the longevity of that car is going to be much shorter. Like you could get a car that was driven by, a high school kid, like a madman for a bunch of years. That's not the reliable car that it otherwise would be 5 or 6 or 7 years down the road. It starts to have more problems than the person who drove it like a normal, sane person. Like we know that about automobiles, but yet we don't apply that same thinking to baseball pitchers or even softball pitchers. They're crazy overused because people have this mindset that, oh, it's a windmill, it's a different motion, it's a natural motion. It's not natural. Like, it's not okay for kids to be pitching as much as they pitch in softball either. And I'm not going to get deep into that because I'm not a softball pitching guru. I'm not deep enough. I'm not going to go beyond my level of expertise here. But I know for a fact that what they're doing is not correct. So regardless, we need to have more caution with youth pitchers. And so in general, here should be the guidelines for a typical tournament weekend. If your starting pitcher starts and goes more than 3 innings, he's done for the weekend. You don't pitch him again. That's just how it is. If your starter goes 2 innings and you're just shelling this team, pull him, give him 2 days rest. So if it's like Thursday, you can maybe throw him again Friday, or if it's Sunday, or if it's Friday, pull him, maybe get an inning or 2 at him on Sunday, but you don't start him again after going 2 innings and then going all the way back out on Sunday. So if they go 2 innings, you can yank them out of there, and maybe with a day rest, or hopefully 2 days rest, you get another inning or 2 out of them. Because if you don't want to run them out there for a worthless game where you're just going to destroy that team, because this happens, you still have to be cautious. It's not like, oh, we'll just nix this start because they warmed up. They had a long warm up. They still throw in between innings, getting your pre-inning warm-ups, your 6 to 8 pitches. And then you throw 2 innings and you stand up and you sit down. You stand up and you sit down. There's a bigger toll than just the number of pitches. It's how many times you get up and down. So you might throw 70 pitches in a game over 7 innings. It's still a significantly higher toll because you sat up and went down. You got up, you went down. You got up, you sat down. That's the hardest thing. And starting pitchers know this when they're getting ready for the season. It's not just pure pitch count. It's about how many times you get up and sit back down. So throwing 70 pitches in a bullpen is not the same as throwing 7 innings of 10 pitches in a bullpen where you rest for 4 or 5 minutes in between each. It's much harder to do the second one than the first. So, number one, if you start and you get past the second inning, that's it for the weekend. If you get shelled in the third inning, or your team blows them out and you go out for the third inning, you should be done. And if you only go 2 innings in that start, you should definitely have at least 1 rest day, hopefully 2 before you pitch again. And if you only have 1 rest day, then you shouldn't pitch more than like 1, maybe 2 innings at max. So number 1 rule is, if you start, that's all you're going to pitch this weekend, and that's fine. You're not going to start on Friday and then pitch in relief on Sunday. You're not going to go 5 innings and then pitch 2 more on Sunday. You're not going to pitch 2 innings and then start on Sunday either. So the converse is also true. You see this all the time, and it's not okay. It's just not okay. So if your son's doing this, talk to his coach. And look, if you have to have a hard conversation, do it. Because it's long-term, his arm health, and no one else is going to vouch for him. He's going to say his arm feels fine, and he's probably not going to be lying, and he's going to get run back out there. And that's just the way it is. So unless someone vouches for him, and this should be the coach's place to say, no, you're not pitching, even though you feel okay, it's just not okay for you to pitch 40 pitches yesterday and then go back in today. I'm sorry, you need 2 days of rest. So we're pretty firm about that. Sometimes you get backed into a corner, and you might have to use a kid who threw 2 innings yesterday for another 2 innings today because the tournament demands it and you're 100% out of pitching. That occasionally happens. It's not ideal, but we just hope it's not at the end of the world with that kind of stuff. But like bringing back a starter who threw yesterday to throw today, it's just not the way to go. Beyond that, you want to try to get pitchers rest before they're going to pitch. You don't want to have them out there, and I've done this. It happened last week. I had one of my infielders out there. I intended to pull him in the 3rd or 4th inning so he would rest and get more than just a breather between games and start, but I didn't. I let him out there till the 5th or 6th, and I regretted doing that. You try to get them time on the bench so they pitch as fresh as they can possibly pitch, and then hopefully give them some rest after the game before they go back out there and play shortstop again or play third base again, because it's just a lot of throws. So you try to do your best about that, about not running them ragged right up until they're then going to pitch the next game. So if you can, try to organize it so your starting pitcher for whatever game it is not playing a significant throwing role in the previous game. So if you have to EH him or use him as the DH, whatever, or sit him, just do it. And this is the other thing. You cannot have a team with a roster of 10 or 11 players. Unless they absolutely all can pitch well, you can't do that. And you certainly can't pitch only 6 or 7 or 5 or kids from your team, because that happens too. There are teams everywhere who they only pitch 6 kids. You can't have a 6-man pitching staff. You have to have at least 10 guys to pitch through a 4-game weekend. That's just how it has to be. Sure, you could have 4 complete games. That happens sometimes. One of our teams last weekend had 3 complete games in their weekend, 75 pitches, 72 pitches, and like a 90-pitch game. That happens. That's amazing. That's great. But that's extremely rare, because usually someone's going to get blown up. You're going to blow another team up, and you're going to have a starter go 5 good innings. First reliever comes in, can't get the job done. You got to burn another reliever. You just end up burning through arms. And if you're doing things right, if you have a kid on Saturday who threw 2 innings in relief, he's not really going to be available for more than maybe an inning on Sunday. And hopefully you have to use him on Sunday. So if you're using your relievers improperly and you're overusing them, sure, a 6-man pitching staff works. If you're not overusing your kids, then a 6-man pitching staff absolutely cannot possibly work. So you need to look closely at the complexion of your team. If your team has 10 or 11 kids on it, or 9 kids, there are teams that do have 9 or 10 kids, just be prepared that if your kid's a pitcher on that team, he's going to get overused. Just plain and simple. And again, there could be some exceptions where every kid pitches and is competent. So I know there's going to be some exceptions, but most of the time those teams overuse their pitchers a lot. And the other thing, which I'm going to address now, is catchers. You cannot pitch and catch your kids on the same day. And really, if a kid is a significant catcher, they throw so darn much as catchers, they should not pitch any significant amount. So we have a pretty much full-time catcher on one team. He doesn't pitch for us, for my team. 15U, we have another pretty much full-time catcher for that team. He pitches in relief, maybe 2 innings a weekend. He's not a starter. And if I do have a starter, like last weekend, we did a triple header, and one of our starting pitchers was a catcher, so he caught 2 days prior, I think. So he was going to pitch the first or second game of that triple header, so he was not going to catch that entire day. And another of our very good pitchers is another catcher, and he usually pitches in relief for us. But because that kid pitched that day. Our third catcher pitched that day, and our starting catcher couldn't catch all 3 games. I told the other pitcher, I'm like, look, I can't use you on the mound today because I'm just not going to have you catch a whole game and then pitch in relief. That's just like not good for your body. It's not good for your arm. He said, okay. So he pitched 2. He actually didn't end up pitching all that day. He caught a game, played shortstop a little bit, and I didn't pitch him. So we were going to run out at some point, but I just still was not going to use him because that's just like 250 throws in a day for him and pitching. That's just way too much. It's not okay. So if you have kids that pitch and catch, and I understand that they do this a lot at the young levels, you have to break it up, and you have to get more kids who are competent catchers. You can't have just one competent catcher and then expect that kid to give you innings on the mound too. It's not all right. So the catcher thing can take some balance. I think you need 3 catchers on each team. And if you don't have 3 catchers, then develop them or pick better next year at tryouts. But it's tough to do it with 2 catchers, especially if one of them is a decent pitcher who doesn't want to say, no, I only want to do one or the other. And I told our pitchers who are catchers, you're only going to be a backup catcher. You'll catch 1 game each weekend so that I can get some distance between your pitching. And that's fine. And if you want to be a full-time catcher, then we're going to start to phase out your pitching. You'll be a reliever at most, and a last sort of resort reliever on that note. So in general, the pitch count recommendations by like the MLB Pitch Smart and that are generally followed in high levels of baseball are a day rest for every 20 pitches or so. And if you start and you go at least a couple innings, you're going to be down for your solid 4 days of rest before your next start. So that is the general thing. So like I heard recently of a kid who threw 60 pitches on Thursday, 80 pitches on his start on Sunday, and then 40 more on Wednesday. That's 180 pitches in a 6-day span. It's not all right. So that kind of stuff continues to happen. None of those pitch counts individually are super high. Like 80 pitches is acceptable for a 13 or 14-year-old, but after throwing 60 on Thursday with only 2 days rest and playing the infield after that, and then Monday or Tuesday, again, maybe they get a little more rest because they're not playing, but then another game, that's way more pitches than a major league pitcher would throw in a 6-day span. So if you averaged out the 110 pitches a major league starter would throw over those 6 days, that's still, I got to do some math, but that's, 15, 20 pitches a day on average. So if you made that a 6-day span, that'd be 120, 130 pitches. They would never throw 180 in a 6-day span. No reliever would ever have that workload, but yet we have kids that have that workload. So it's just a very backward system. You want to try to give them as much time as they can. You have to basically break up your staff into starting pitchers and relief pitchers and try to keep them in those roles as much as you can so that the kids that play the field who are more like full-time infielders can be just relievers. And if you do have to have a kid, because obviously the best athletes throw the hardest and they pitch because they throw the hardest and they play shortstop because they're the best athletes. That's extremely common. Your shortstop's almost always going to pitch for you in youth baseball. You just have to try to find a better balance and just try to limit their pitch count as much as you can. You can't run those kids out there for 110 pitches every time. And that happens because they're going to run back right out to short. And like as an old guy who's got a run down arm, that's like hurts you thinking about it, like playing shortstop after throwing 110 pitches. Because you can't not uncork throws. You can't send a guy out in the outfield and say, hey, just don't throw him, just throw him in easy. Like that doesn't happen. That doesn't work. So it's complex. It is not just like simple cut and dry, like, oh, just do this. It gets complex. Trying to balance your games out, trying to plan out 4 or 5 games in a weekend to say, okay, he's going to start here. He plays these positions. So, and then here are my catchers. My catcher's going to pitch this day. It gets tough to make all the pieces fit, but you just have to plan it out a little bit better before the weekend starts and try to say, okay, this is my game plan. I'm going to try to stick to it as much as I can so that we're not just running everyone ragged. But pitch counts, they're still probably the easiest tool to use. Obviously, there's the Modus sleeve, which can work well depending on your population and who's using it. But pitch counts are still the biggest thing to just saying, hey, this is the workload. We're going to stay beneath this. If you're this type of pitcher or this type of pitcher or this age of pitcher, and that's just the way you have to go. So it's like I said, it's not a simple thing, but it requires planning, and it also requires parents and players to know when they're being overused. So look at your pitch counts throughout the week. Go to the MLB Pitch Smart website. look at their guidelines, and then think about how you've been used, and you'll have a good idea of whether your coach is overusing you or not. And if he is, there needs to be a conversation had, because there are probably thousands and thousands of coaches out there who are doing this right now. We see them every week at other tournaments. Oh, that same kid's pitching again against us. Cool. He started on Thursday. He's starting against us on Sunday. Cool, guys. That happens consistently. Happened last year. A kid started a game on Thursday, started against us on Sunday. Through 6 innings both days. That's not all right. I mean, that kid was good. He beat us on Sunday. He's not going to beat anyone in 5 years because his arm's going to be destroyed. So it's a tough thing. Hopefully this has given you some of the sense that you need, and some of the general rules. And I'm going to put these in a blog post as well, so those will kind of be like a companion piece in there. But it's not simple, but we need to do better to try to figure all this stuff out. Pitch counts, they're still the number one tool for youth baseball coaches.